Okay guys, today we are going to start our revision as our syllabus has been completed. Now it's time to start our revision, and the first topic I have decided to revise is basics of graphing and scale. And I believe that many of you are familiar with this topic. So guys, today you are going to be muted. So if you have any query, you just raise your hand for the question, then I will unmute yourself. Okay. Now the topic has been started. So the first topic for our revision is basics of graphing and scaling. We have discussed it earlier in chapter number 6. We have thoroughly discussed it. Okay. But now we are going to revise it. So first of all, let me tell you about the table of content. In this topic, we are going to cover about what is graph, quadrants of graph, parts of graph with respect to grid lines, method for scaling of graphs, plotting the values on graph, and solve examples. Abdurrafi, if you are not getting my voice, don't worry about it. I am going to upload this lecture on my Google Classroom, so just stay there. Okay? Okay, guys. Starting from what is graph? A diagram showing the relation between variable quantities, typically of two variables, each measured along one of a pair of axes at right angle. Whenever we have to compare two or more than two values, we have such tools to check whether we can compare these things or not. Among the tools we have for comparing these or such values, one of the most important tool is graph. And graph is basically the the representation of relationship between variable quantity. It could be of more than two types, but for your syllabus we have to work for only two variables. Okay. Okay guys, one of you student is not using your own name. Kindly use your own name so I can mark your attendance easily. Don't use your father or mother name. Use your own name so I can mark your attendance easily. Okay? Okay guys, moving ahead. We have two axes right now in front of the screen. One of them is x-axis, which is horizontally lying, while one of them is y-axis, which is vertically standing. The point where these two axes are intersecting each other is known as origin. If you move left or right from origin, then you are moving through x-axis or abscissa. If you are moving if you are moving from origin to left or right, okay, but you are moving through x-axis or abscissa. Ji Abdul Rafi, unmute yourself.
सर
जी बेटा
सिलेबस खत्म हो गया हमारा सारे टर्म का रिवीजन करा रहे हैं आप
बेटा सिलेबस हमारा एक्सरसाइज 10B तक ही कट डाउन हो गया था क्योंकि हमारा जो है वो फिजिकल क्लासेस कंप्लीट हो चुकी थी. सो अब रिवीजन का टाइम हो गया. सो योर पेपर मस्ट कंटेन four topics. One of them is graph, the percentages, the number patterns, and the lines. Okay.
ओके सर
जी असम बोलिए.
सर ये ग्राफ वाला चैप्टर है.
Yes. Okay guys, if you are moving left or right from the origin, then basically you are moving through x-axis, and the other name for this x-axis is abscissa. Kindly write it down or take the screenshot of this. Next, if you are moving upward or downward from the origin, then you are moving through y-axis or ordinate. If you are moving vertically means upward or downward from the origin, then basically you are moving through y-axis, and the other name for this y-axis is ordinate. So you may write it down or you may take the screenshot of it just for your ease. Okay. So this is your y-axis. Moving ahead. Quadrants of graph. Whenever we discuss about the graphs, we must have something to discuss it categorically. Beta Usman, you just have to take the screenshot of it, or you just wait for the recording of this lecture, because I am going to upload this lecture on your Google Classroom just for your ease. So if you are not going to write it, don't worry about it. You just take the screenshot of the screen, or you just wait for the uploading of this recorded lecture. Okay. Beta, Mr. Abid, kindly use your own name because I have to mark your attendance and I am unable to know who are you. So please write your own name. There are 4 quadrants of graph. You can see clearly whenever 2 axes cut each other, you can see 4 different parts of a graph. This is your first quadrant of the graph. Quad means whenever you divide a whole value into 4 equal parts. Quad means 4. Quadrants mean whenever you cut a graph into 4 equal pieces, then these 4 equal pieces are known as quadrants. So this is your first quadrant. Top right is your first quadrant. Top left is your second quadrant. Bottom left is your third quadrant. Bottom right is your fourth quadrant. So these are the 4 quadrants in your graph. Now moving ahead. If you move away from the origin towards right, if you are moved away from the origin towards right, we are moving towards right from the origin, then we are moving through positive x-axis. It means whatever the value written on the right side of the origin, whatever the value we write on the right side of the origin, it must lie on the positive x-axis. Like this is your positive x-axis. Moving ahead. If you move away from the origin towards left, now you have to move towards left from the origin, then you are moving through the negative x-axis. It means whenever we have any value on the left hand side of the origin, it means you are working on the negative x-axis. Okay? Moving ahead. If you move away from the origin towards upward, now you are standing on an origin and you are moving towards upward. Okay, SM, let me do my work please right now. If you move away from the origin towards upward, you are standing on origin and now you are moving upward from the origin. You are basically elevating yourself, then you are moving through positive y-axis. It means whenever you have any value written upward of the origin, then basically this point lies on positive y-axis. Every value above origin must show that you are working on positive y-axis. So this is your positive y-axis. Similarly, if you move away from the origin, towards downward, then you are moving through negative y-axis. Now you are moving on origin, you are moving towards downward. It means you are moving through negative y-axis, and whatever the value written beneath or bottom of the origin, it means this point lies on negative y-axis. Got it? Now moving ahead. Beta, don't leave the class because after 4 minutes I am going to take your attendance. So don't go anywhere. So we have discussed that we have 4 quadrants of graph, the first, the second, the third and the fourth. ठीक है. Moving towards right hand side from the origin shows your positive x-axis. Moving towards left side of the origin shows your negative x-axis. Moving towards upward from the origin shows your positive y-axis. Moving towards downward of the negative, moving towards downward of the origin shows your negative y-axis. Moving ahead, as we have discussed earlier, that a graph has four coordinates. So if you have a point in which both coordinates, that is x and y, are positive, then you need to lie them or plot them in first quadrant. If you have a coordinate in which both x and y are positive, then don't worry about it, because you are going to plot this particular coordinate in quadrant number 1. So this shows me that whatever the value plotted, marked, light on first quadrant must have positive x and y axis. So keep this thing in your mind. Okay? जी असम बोलिए. असम.
सर मैं आपने जो इस क्वाड्रेंट्स की जो डेफिनेशन है उसमें ये आई स्मॉल आई डॉट ई क्या मतलब होता है, क्या
इसका
मतलब है?
इन एग्जाम्पल का मतलब फॉर एग्जाम्पल.
हेलो सर.
इन एग्जाम एक मिनट. इन एग्जाम्पल का मतलब फॉर एग्जाम्पल. I.E means in example. This is a French phrase but mostly used in English. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
Okay? Okay. जी अब्दुल हादी.
सर सर आई का मतलब वो भी होता है ना, दैट इज.
Yes. Basically, it is also known as that is in English, but the most appropriate pronunciation is in example. ठीक है? Okay guys, moving ahead. So if you have a point in which both x or y axis, in which x or y are positive, it means that particular point must plot on or in first quadrant. Keep this thing in your mind. जी बेटा सोहेब बोलिए.
सर ये कॉपी में लिखना है, ये तो हमने किया हुआ है.
No, this is just a revision, so don't worry about it. You just have to follow through it. You just have to watch the lecture on the Google Classroom. You are not responsible for writing it. Okay, you just need to revise it. Okay. जी अंजिला बोलिए.
सर हमने एक्सरसाइज 10 भी कल खत्म की थी ना.
Yes.
और ये अभी आप रिवीजन करा रहे हैं. सर अगर आप ग्राफ का रिवीजन खत्म कराएंगे फिर आप नंबर पैटर्न का करेंगे रिवीजन.
Yes. Is this your question, Anzala? Do you really think? Okay guys, so if we have a coordinate in which both x and y are positive, then that particular coordinate must lie in first quadrant. Similarly, if you have a point in which x coordinate is negative while y coordinate is positive, then you need to lie them in second quadrant. Now if we have another coordinate in which x is negative but the y is positive, then we have to plot that particular point, that particular coordinate in second quadrant. Keep this thing in your mind. In first quadrant, both x and y are positive. In second quadrant, x is negative while the y is positive. Similarly, if you have a point in which both coordinates, that is x and y, are negative, then you need to lie them or plot them in third quadrant. Now we have a coordinate in which x is negative as well as y is negative. It means we are going to plot that particular point or coordinate in third quadrant. Okay? And finally, if you have a point in which x coordinate is positive but the y coordinate is negative, we have positive x coordinate but the negative y coordinate, it represents that we are going to plot that particular point in fourth quadrant. So basically we have four different coordinates. First of them, we have four different quadrants. If we have positive x and y axis, If we have positive x and y coordinate, then it must be plotted in first quadrant. If we have positive y-axis but the negative x-axis, we are going to plot that particular value in second quadrant. If we have both x and y are negative, then we are going to plot that particular point in third quadrant. And if we have positive x-axis but the negative y-axis, then we are going to plot that particular value in the fourth quadrant. I believe that all of you must know where we have to plot which coordinate. If you have any query, you may ask, because I'm going to take your attendance. So please wait for a while. Don't go anywhere. Okay. Okay guys, now moving ahead. Now parts of graph with respect to grid lines. Now we are further classifying the quadrants of the graph, or you may say graph. Okay? In order to understand this topic, first of all you need to know about some basic parameters. Whenever we are going to discuss about the graph, we must have some parameters to further investigate it. As we have discussed earlier, that the graph is the combination of two axes. One of them is y-axis while the other is x-axis. These two axes are intersecting each other at origin. If we are moving through positive x-axis, if we are moving through horizontal axis, it is known as x-axis. If we are moving through vertical axis, it means we are moving through y-axis. We have four coordinates, we have discussed it earlier. Now moving through some more important parts. A graph can be represented by only the axis. This is your graph, but it doesn't have any grid lines. It just has some marking, some graduated values in it. So it doesn't mean that it is not a graph. It is a graph, but it is without grid lines. So a graph can be represented by only the axis. Okay. The axes be further explained or divided by major grid lines. These axes can be further explained or divided by major grid lines like this. Now you can see that we have major grid lines on our axis. Okay, this is your major grid lines. Now moving through next point. But most importantly, and for the most appropriate and accurate values, these axes can be further divided or explained by minor grid lines. Like you may see that we have divided major grid lines into smaller one, into minor one. So for the most appropriate and the most accurate values, we must have minor grid lines in our graph. Okay, so we revise it again. In order to discuss a graph accurately, we must have some basic parameters. Number one, the graph can be represented by only two major grid lines, as we have done it initially. Then these axes can be further divided or further explained by major grid lines like this. This is your major grid line. But in order to get more appropriate and accurate value, you must divide these grid lines, major grid lines, into minor one like this. This type of graph will give you the more accurate and appropriate value. So in order to discuss graph, we must have three parameters. One of them, that we can represent a graph only by the axes, then we can represent the graph only by the major grid line. But in order to get the most accurate and more appropriate values, we must have minor grid lines in our graph like shown on the screen. Moving ahead. Methods for scaling of graph. Sometimes it is very difficult for students to do proper scaling. Sometimes scaling is given in the question, which help a student to draw the graph easily, but sometimes you have to make your own scaling. So in order to avoid any misconception, any miscalculation, any misreading, you must know how to do proper scaling. Okay, better wait for a while. Okay guys, moving ahead. Point to remember: number one, keep in mind that the graph you are provided in examination is centimeter graph. Whenever you are going to appear in CAIE exam, the graph you are provided with in the exam is basically a centimeter graph. So it is good for you, it is best for you to buy or purchase a centimeter graph and start working on it just for your practice for that time. Okay, so you must have centimeter graph in your hand so you may do yourself best. Okay, next consider the following column in which we have different values of two parameters. Now we have two columns in which we are provided with two values. One of the value are for the x-axis, while the other values are for the y. So for x we have -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and for y we have 0, 5, 8, 9, 8, 5, 0. Above values represent that you have positive values for y-axis. We can clearly see that for the y-axis we have every value is positive. Every value is positive in y-axis, while for the x-axis or for the values of x we have some negative values and as well as some positive values. So it represents that we are going to work only on the first two quadrants, because in first quadrant we have positive x and y axis. Okay, in first quadrant we have positive x and y coordinate, and in second quadrant we have negative x but positive y coordinate. So it believes that by watching your values you may calculate or observe or analyze that which kind of graph you have to. Either you have to draw four quadrants of the graph, either you have to draw only one quadrant of the graph. Right now we have positive y values but the negative as well as positive values of x. So it is confirmed that we are going to draw only two quadrants of the graph, that are one or first quadrant or the second quadrant. Okay, now moving ahead. Beta, Mr. Abid, kindly use your own name because I am unable to mark your attendance. I believe you can hear me. A person whose name is Iram Abid on participants list, kindly use your own name because I am unable to mark your attendance with this name. Please. So point to remember number 2, don't waste the graph by drawing every column. Draw only those graphs quadrants in which values are provided. You don't try to waste your graph by drawing the inappropriate or useless quadrants. You just draw only those quadrants which are useful in order to plot your values. Okay, guys. Moving ahead. First of all, we need to find the range of these two values as below. Now moving ahead, the first thing for scaling, we must have, okay beta, thank you. Now we have only 2 minutes remaining for our class. So I think we just covered this one more value, one more point. First of all, we need to find the range of these two values as below. We have two values, one for the x while the other for y. And we have to find the range of these values. So how can we find the range of these two values? Point to remember number 3. Find the ranges of both values by subtracting the smallest value from the greatest value. So if you need to find the range for x, you must know which value is the smallest and which value is greatest. From the values given, I can see that 4 is the greatest value of x while -2 is the smallest value of x. So I'm going to subtract these values in order to get the ranges. So range for x-axis equals to 4 minus into -2, which will give you 4 plus 2 equals to 6. So the range of x-axis is 6. It means we have to plot 6 values along x-axis because we are provided with 6 values of x-axis. Next, range of y-axis. The greatest value for y is 9. The smallest value for y is 0. So 9 minus 0 equals to 9. It means along y-axis we have to plot only 9 values for y.